The sun dipped low over the Judean desert, casting long shadows across the dry, cracked earth. You could almost smell the dust rising, kicked up by the relentless march of thousands of boots. Far off, the sound of metal clashing against stone echoed faintly. And then complete silence, a silence so deep it felt like the weight of an entire empire pressing down on everything it touched. Above on the plateau, figures moved in the fading light, their voices barely audible, carried by the wind. A man stood before them, his voice calm but filled with urgency, painting a grim picture of what awaited if they fell into Roman hands. The men nodded, their faces grim. The women pulled their children closer, and then one by one they made their choice. Not surrender, not chains, something far more defiant. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a story that would echo through the ages. A story of a machine built for conquest, and the people who refused to feed it. This wasn't random cruelty. This was Rome at its most ruthless, its most efficient, a system designed not just to break bodies, but to crush spirits. In the year we now call 73 AD, after the flames of Jerusalem had finally cooled, the Roman legions turned their gaze to a lone fortress, rising out of the desert like a defiant fist, Masada. A band of Jewish rebels had taken refuge here, holding out against the might of an empire that had already crushed their holy city. The stakes were high, survival versus obliteration. What happened on that mountaintop wasn't just a siege, it was a clash between unbreakable will and unstoppable force. At the centre of it all was the fear of what Roman victory truly meant for the innocent caught in the middle. Stay with me, because beneath the heroism there lies a darker truth about power, about how it devours everything in its path. But before we climb that ramp, let's take a step back. In the 1st century, the Roman Empire stretched from the misty forests of Britain to the scorching sands of Egypt. A sprawling web of roads, legions, and taxes kept the machine running smoothly. At the heart of it all was the emperor, but in the provinces, it was the governors and generals who truly pulled the strings. Judea, that stubborn corner of the world, had been simmering for years. Taxes too high, customs trampled, and a people who worshipped one god clashing with an empire that deified its rulers. The spark that set it all off came in 66 AD, when Jewish fighters rose up against Roman rule, seizing Jerusalem and dreaming of independence. Enter Titus, the son of Emperor Vespasian. He was the hammer sent to crush the uprising. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the calculating eyes of a man bred for leadership, Titus had seen battle before, but this war would define him. In 70 AD, he led the Roman legions that besieged Jerusalem, a city swollen with refugees and defenders. The siege was brutal, starvation, catapults hurling stones day and night, and when the walls finally cracked, the streets ran red with blood. Historians debate the death toll, but estimates suggest over 1 million died, with tens of thousands sold into slavery. Titus didn't start as a monster. Born in Rome around 39 AD, he grew up in the shadow of power, serving in the military from a young age. A defining moment in his life came during the chaotic year of the 4 emperors in 69 AD. Vespasian, his father, seized the throne, and Titus learned quickly that mercy was a luxury empires could not afford. Weakness invited rebellion. Strength ensured obedience. Then Jerusalem fell. Titus ordered the destruction of the temple, though some accounts claim he tried to save it. Either way, the flames lit up the sky, and with them, it seemed as though the heart of Jewish resistance had died. But not quite. A few holdouts scattered, including a group led by a fierce warrior named Eleazar. Eleazar wasn't just a fighter, he was a Sicarii, a member of the dagger-wielding zealots who struck from the shadows. His band fled to Masada, a fortress built by Herod the Great decades earlier. Perched atop a sheer cliff, it was a natural stronghold, stocked with enough food and water to last for years. Here they vowed to live free, or not at all. The turning point for Rome came when reports reached them of these rebels raiding nearby villages, keeping the flames of revolt alive. Titus, now back in Rome and celebrating his triumph, left orders for one final push. Finish it! His general Flavius Silva would lead the last assault. The machine demanded closure. The desert air shimmered with heat as Silva's legion arrived. Picture it, nearly 9,000 men, the core of the 10th Legion, hardened by years of battle, joined by auxiliaries from conquered lands. They set up camp around the base of the mountain, constructing a ring of tents and walls that would seal off any possible escape. Up top, Eleazar and his people, about 960 in all including families, watched from the ramparts. Among them was a woman we'll call Miriam. She was in her 30s with hands worn from weaving and a quiet strength forged by loss. Her husband had fallen in Jerusalem, leaving her with 2 young sons. Miriam wasn't a warrior, but like many others there, she tended to the gardens, mended clothes, and whispered prayers for deliverance. Miriam represented the heart of Masada, not the fighters, but the lives they protected. Silva surveyed the cliffs. Masada rose over 1,000 feet, its sides like sheer walls carved by some ancient god. Herod had fortified it with palaces, storehouses, and systems to catch every drop of rain. The rebels had enough grain, dates, and oil to last months, maybe years. But Rome specialized in patience. Silva ordered the construction of a circumvallation wall, more than 2 miles long, dotted with towers to prevent any raids or supplies from reaching the rebels. The men grumbled in the heat, but they knew the drill. This was the system at work. Engineers plotted, soldiers built, and the enemy starved. Weeks passed. The Romans probed for weaknesses, but the cliffs resisted their every attempt. Then Silva spotted a weaker spur on the western side of the mountain, lower than the rest. "Build the ramp," he commanded. Thousands of slaves, many of them captured Jews, were pressed into service, hauling dirt and stones under the crack of the whip. The ramp grew, massive earthworks snaking up the mountainside. Archers covered the workers, trading shots with the rebels above. Eleazar's men rolled boulders down, but the ramp inched higher, relentlessly. Miriam watched from the plateau, her 2 sons playing nearby, oblivious to the doom that was closing in on them. She had heard the stories from Jerusalem, how Titus's soldiers, once inside the walls, spared no one in their fury. Old men were crucified, children dashed against stones, and women, whispers of women, dragged away as spoils of war. Miriam shuddered, pulling her sons close, but that wasn't even the worst part. The ramp neared completion, and Silva prepared the assault tower, a wooden behemoth on wheels, armoured against fire. The Romans began battering the casemate wall, a double layer of defence. Eleazar rallied his fighters. "We fight for our freedom. We fight for our God." Skirmishes erupted. Arrows flew, but the breach in the wall widened. As night fell, the rebels gathered, and Eleazar stood before them. His voice cut through the tension. He spoke of Roman mercy as a lie, of the fate that awaited them if they surrendered. "Our wives abused," he said, "our children enslaved." The crowd murmured in agreement. Miriam felt a chill despite the desert heat. She had seen enough to know that Eleazar was right. The system didn't just conquer, it humiliated. Meanwhile, in the Roman camp below, a centurion named Lucius wiped sweat from his brow as he sharpened his gladius. He had served under Titus during the siege of Jerusalem, where the orders had been clear: take what you will, but break their spirit. Lucius remembered the chaos, the screams, the blood. Women pleading as soldiers claimed their rewards. It was unspoken policy, but understood all the same. Victory meant plunder, and in war, bodies were currency. Silva addressed the troops. "Tomorrow we end this," he said. "The emperor expects no loose ends." The men cheered, but Lucius felt a twinge in his gut. These rebels fought hard. Still, orders were orders. The machine rolled on. Up on the mountaintop, the mood darkened. Eleazar proposed the unthinkable. Better to die free than live as slaves. He recounted tales from other sieges, at Gamala, where women threw themselves from cliffs to escape violation, and at Jotapata, where survivors were paraded in chains. The assembly debated, voices rose, some argued for a last stand, but Eleazar pressed on. Let us deny them their triumph. Miriam listened, her heart pounding. Her boys slept nearby, innocent in the firelight. She thought back to her life before the war, a simple home in Judea, weaving cloth for the market. Now this, tears filled her eyes, but so did resolve. One by one the men agreed. They drew lots for the grim task. The night deepened. Families huddled together, sharing final words. A quiet moment here, a father telling his daughter stories of David and Goliath. The air was scented with olive oil from lamps. Laughter mixed with sobs, a brief reprieve amid the storm. Miriam knelt with her sons, explaining in gentle terms. We're going to a better place, she whispered. But doubt crept in. Was this right? The Torah forbids suicide. Yet what choice did they have? The ramp loomed like a serpent ready to strike. Dawn broke. The Romans advanced. The tower rumbled up the ramp, battering rams thundering against the inner wall. Flames licked at the wooden beams. The rebels set fire to their own defences, burning them as a last stand. Silver watched from below, confident. Titus's victory would be complete. But when the breach opened, no arrows greeted them. No shouts, just smoke and silence. The legionaries poured in, swords drawn, expecting resistance. Instead, they found hundreds of bodies, laid out in orderly rows, men beside wives, parents cradling children. Throats slit with care, the work done with grim precision. Lucius stepped over the bodies, his stomach churning. What madness is this? He muttered under his breath. In a cavern below, Miriam hid with another woman and 5 children. Water dripped in the darkness. They could hear the Romans above, their shouts growing louder as the bodies were discovered. Eleazar's plan had worked for most, but these few had chosen life, perhaps to tell the tale. The women emerged, hands raised in surrender. Silver questioned them. They recounted the night, the speech, the lots, the farewells. 960 dead, by their own hands, denying Rome its parade of captives. The general nodded, impressed despite himself. Brave fools, he muttered. The survivors were taken, but they were not harmed immediately. Spoils for the empire. The aftermath unfolded swiftly. Silver reported back to Titus, now emperor, after his father's death. Masada fell. The revolt ended. The 10th Legion garrisoned the site briefly, before abandoning it to the desert winds. For the rebels, the community was erased. Families were gone, a way of life scattered. Survivors like Miriam faded into history. We don't know her fate for certain, but many captives ended up in Roman arenas or as household slaves. Their stories were silenced, power shifted. Rome tightened its control over Judea, renaming it Palestina in an effort to erase all Jewish ties to the land. The irony was stark. The fortress built by Herod, a puppet of Rome, had become a symbol of resistance against the empire that built it. Centuries passed. The sands buried the truth. Then in the 20th century came the discovery. Archaeologist Yigal Yadin led excavations in the 1960s, uncovering palaces, scrolls, and artifacts. Spindle whorls and hairpins spoke of the women's lives during the siege. The ramp still stood, a testament to Roman engineering. Skeletons in a cave, including women and children, hinted at the final act. Though the numbers didn't perfectly match Josephus's account, historians debated, was it mass suicide or Roman slaughter? Josephus, the Jewish turncoat, who wrote the only eyewitness account, might have embellished the story for drama. Yet the evidence aligns well enough. The pottery, the coin stamped with the words, "For the freedom of Zion." Yadin's team found lots, ostraca with names, perhaps used in that fateful drawing. Why does it matter now? This wasn't just ancient drama. It teaches us about the systems that grind people down and the desperate acts people take to preserve their dignity. Think of modern parallels. besieged cities where civilians choose death over subjugation. Echoes of this story appear in conflicts where power ignores humanity. Masada reminds us that resistance takes many forms, not always victory, but the refusal to be broken. And that's a universal truth. Empires fall, but stories endure, carried by those who choose to listen. Back to that plateau. The sun is setting once again. The figures fade, but their choice lingers. They were meant to vanish, footnotes in Rome's triumph. But they didn't. Through whispers in caverns, through ink on scrolls, through stones unearthed, they survive. And now, they're here with you, because you chose to listen. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done on that mountaintop? Subscribe for more echoes from the past. And in the silence that follows, remember, freedom isn't given. It's taken, even from the jaws of defeat.